Hey everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Thanks for joining me today. I want to work on some 2.5 inch squares, and then I've also cut some half square triangles from 2.5 inch black squares. I've got something in my head. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to give it a try. I also happened to find a square of one of the stripes, so I cut that just to try out. Who knows? In my current obsession with stripes, it might be just the thing. I did manage to cut the binding strips for the quilt for which I originally purchased this fabric. So now I know what I have left is okay to use. Pardon all the little black bits that are going to be floating around. I don't want to wipe them off because that makes a not great sound on the camera. Anyway, so here's my plan. I want to use these bright squares, some with print, some without. We'll see how it goes. And then I want to put a black half square triangle next to it so that it matches up. Now this is not going to be perfect because we've got this whole point thing going on, but this is using up scraps, so it's just going to be the way it is. And then I want to use these triangles in order to turn directions. So I want to have this going off in different directions. This one's going to go off screen. Sorry about that, but you'll be getting the gist of what I'm doing. This may be too normal for me. Not sure. But at this point, I just want to play around with them and see if it's going to work. And once I sew these two seams, then this will fit a little bit better. But again, it's not going to be perfect. And I recognize that. So let's see if we can turn a corner here. And then I can just keep building on that idea. I hope you aren't having to listen to this crazy wind we're having right now. And just keep plugging along with some. You could make all kinds of shapes with this. All right, since this has come out, let's see what happens if I put in a stripe. Because you know I have to put in a stripe. Now, am I going to be piecing these in the end? I potentially could, but I think I want to sew these all together on the sides and then applique the shape, whatever it winds up being. I could make this a half square triangle unit, sewing the white piece on there. But I don't know that I want to fuss around too much with, let's do this. I know some of these are going to go off frame, but you can imagine it in your heads because my frame just isn't that big. And just keep moving them along one way or another. I'm almost thinking I want it to be solids. Maybe all solids, maybe not. And I don't want this to become too uniform in how it's moving across the canvas. And there's not much more I can do without leaving you out completely with the direction these are going. Let's move this one down here. And that's a lot of black going around that piece. So what if we do this and find ourselves another lovely bright piece. Let's go with this one, which is probably too close to that one, but what the heck. This purple is, I think, yeah, it might work. It might be a little too light or unbright or something. Try putting, it actually might turn out that the stripe pieces are good for keeping it a little lighter where all of these black pieces are. Not sure. That could go either way, actually. I like the consistency of having the black there. I just need to decide if there are allowable and if there are rules for how I'm laying this out, and I'm pretty sure I don't want to do that. I've just recently realized that I'm kind of redefining my life. It hasn't changed my life, but just a better way of saying it. And whole long story how it came to be, but basically when I was growing up and my younger years, I always colored inside the lines, and now I'm just not. That's not my jam right now. How do we feel about some solids and some prints? What are we thinking? Probably need a more even distribution of them if we're going to do that. So we kind of see how it looks with some prints in there. Let's try it with just solids. And I need one down here, which you probably aren't seeing all of that one anyway. I think I would want maybe some more yellow in there. I have a sort of look in my mind apparently that I'm not, yeah, that's good. I like that. But I kind of like, there's a squirrel fight outside the window. Interesting. I kind of almost want to have in, kind of almost, sort of, maybe. Want to have some prints in there for a little extra interest and texture. Let's bring this blue one back here somewhere. Not sure where. Probably doesn't really matter a lot. A lot of teal going on over here, which is possibly not the way I would want it. Then we have both of these over here. I could go with, well, then there's a lot of green going on up there. What else do I have in prints? Surely I have something. There's another red, but that, yes, I don't like that there. I just don't have that many prints in the brights. Ah, here's one. Here's one. I can sort of see what that one is. All right, I've gotten to the point where I'm going to be losing you all off the edges, and I don't want to do that. So that will look too much like a star. This is One of the things I'm trying to avoid is to not have these look like stars completely. I mean, I don't want to have this piece here. I love Friendship Star. It's one of my favorite blocks, but that isn't part of what I'm looking for here. It may turn out that maybe that's not a bad idea though, to have some of that look here and there, maybe. So what I'm going to do is start putting some of these pieces together to see how it looks when it's sewed, and the hypotenuses here start to, hypotenuses start to fit in a little better. And we could see how it would look if we were going to piece all of these together, which again is probably pretty doable. Not sure that it's what I want to do. So I'm going to put some of these pieces together and I'll be back to chat with you about how it's going. So I'm back to point out what I mentioned earlier, that because these are, the black half square triangles are cut from 2.5-inch squares, that the seams are not going to come out as we expected them, that they're going to be short because of that whole 45-degree angle thing. So I can either adjust for that by, say, cutting that off before I applique it, and then trimming this edge so that I have like a 45-degree angle there and that triangle is smaller. Hopefully that makes some sense. Not sure that that is what I want to do. I may want to create triangles that are the larger size that I need. So basically add 7/8 to the finish size. And then I think those angles, I think it will be easier and I'll be much happier with the results, because if I'm going to, this is such an awkward piece here and I don't want to try to applique that. This would be doable, that wouldn't bother me, but these acute angles coming in here are going to bother me quite a lot. So I think before I go any further, I'm going to cut some new black triangles. I have plenty of uses for these. They will not go to waste, but I just think I'll be happier if I do that. So this one is using triangles cut from 2 7/8 inch squares, which is ordinarily what you would be doing if you're piecing these together. But you would have a piece that matches this. So it might be a half square triangle where you have, I don't know, like a white square that will match up with the length of the hypotenuse. Because we're using 2.5-inch squares, that isn't ever going to fit. And if you've been sewing for a while, you knew at the outset that all of these were going to be an issue in terms of traditional sewing. We could always have the 2.5-inch squares along the shorter sides, which are, of course, going to match these because you've cut them that way. But then you may as well just do a lot of half square triangles with squares, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly fine exercise. Not what I'm looking for here. I want to be able to go off in this direction too. So I have some choices to make here. I can either just center this and do the applique that way. I can move it up more this way and do the applique that way. Or I can just go haywire, which is probably what I will do, and start slicing off things that I don't necessarily want to have there. So I could do a blunt, say I sew this on here and I could do a blunt cut across there. So now I have another place where I can put a piece like that. I'm going to give something like that a try. And I think to begin with, see, I could do this as a slice across here, and then I'm kind of doing a sort of controlled crumb quilt. And I wouldn't be putting another square in here anyway, because obviously that angle is too acute to do that. So that's an option, and it will start to take on a different shape. I'm not sure it's what I was thinking of, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Could start going off in different directions with things then. And I could end up placing these anywhere along here and create different cuts then. So this could come down, except that when I sew this seam, then this is going to be here. So it's kind of a piecing nightmare. And question is, do I want to do it? I could mix the smaller triangles and the larger triangles, which might be a whole other interesting deal, as long as we're doing funky things. I might do it that way, treat it as kind of a controlled crumb. And just cut off, trim things as I need to, but try not to do anything too drastic, not change the shape too much, and still keep those angles, 45 and 90 degree angles. Just kind of want to see where that goes. Again, I may decide I hate this, but I tried. I mean, I know I'll try, and it didn't turn out as it was in my head, because of course the geometry in my head, unless I really focus on the geometry, isn't going to work. If I trim this here now, then I'm going to get a different shaped triangle there, and I don't think I'm unhappy with that. Shall I do that? Sure. Now, when I applique, I had been thinking I'll just do raw edge applique. Not sure that's going to be possible in all cases, because once I start sewing here, then this is not going to be seamed, so I would need to turn it under unless I trim it afterwards, which won't work. So this is going to be interesting. How will it start to look? And then I can start to put these just about darn near anywhere, right? And have these going off goodness knows where or why, and will I like it or will I hate it? Here's another thing I was thinking about, and this may turn into that somehow, is to just start piecing. There's a connection here. I'm sorry, you probably can't see it, but there is a connection here. Just start piecing these at different angles, which again is a sort of a crumb quilting idea, but without finishing off the seams, intersecting all those seams, so that then that would just get appliqued that way. But again, I'm going to be facing the same issue of, you know, those get turned under, and so that's not going to be straight. So that's something for another day. I want to see how this is going to turn out. That was a tangent I needed to go off on. Sorry if it confused you. All right. So on this one, let's start with this one because I have this extra piece sewed on here already. I could cut this across here so that it matches up with that seam. Again, I want to keep those angled. It's only fabric. Let's do that, but let's not do it on the white paper. All right. So I'm going to, not that, Karen, trim this, and I'm going to be cutting off part of that. I can finish trimming it with scissors, but I wanted to get that angle right. And I'm creating raw edge here, which is kind of a freaky thing for a quilter to purposely do. Trim that off, and now I have a funky little triangle up there, which could be fun. And this is turned under here. I could, of course, always trim that off too. And now I can put another piece right here if I want to, or I could have it down here. I'm going to put it up here just because that seems the logical step at this point. We'll see how it goes. So again, we're doing that crumb sort of effect, except that we aren't necessarily crossing over these seams. Now, this is going to be odd here. I could still applique. Let me put the white under here, you can see it better. I could still applique it this way because my stitch probably would turn that corner fine if I used a long enough stitch. I think it looks a little ragged there. So my choice would be to trim that to that seam line or press everything toward the black and make sure that I press that as the 1/4 inch seam. And I think that's probably what I'm going to do. So I'm not doing a raw edge applique there. And then I could trim that off, of course. Trim off these dog ears while we're at it. And I could lop off that end there if I felt the need, and I might. Let's do it, see what happens. Not exactly what I had in mind, but it's fun to explore anyway. And then I could move something off in that direction. It's really going to be just kind of an abstract whatever. But it sort of reflects my day, to be honest. Not firing on all cylinders today, for sure. It needs a little pressing, honestly. I think I want to have as one of my sort of non-rules that I follow that each square would share a side with black triangle, so that I wouldn't have another piece here, for example. And they could still intersect as here, but it's sharing at least part of its border with a black triangle. But I can have empty spaces in there. That's an acceptable thing. However, if I do this and do a seam there, then again, I'm going to run into that not being level there. I suppose if I had left that seam there, then I could have added that on. Learning as we go, which almost requires a plan ahead of time. Do I want to do that? Maybe, and maybe not. I could also do a configuration that I like, and then just consider that a block and do the same thing but with different fabrics and create a quilt that way instead of doing one big one. Possibility. Crease in there is bothering me. I'm going to take care of that. I kind of want it to be pretty random. And it certainly is that, don't you think? I think I'm going to sew these two pieces and sew these two together and then sew those there. And then sew this piece to here, sew that there, and this piece. We'll see how that looks in the end. As I'm working through this, I begin to see a better order to how I want to do things. And that's part of the learning as I go process. And if it turns out this is too much for me to deal with today, just about everything is, then I'll decide this is not a method for me, but I think it could be all right. All right, so here, when we stitch that together, then I'm going to have this goofy seam thing going here. And again, I can cut it to whatever I want. But if I were to remove this green and then sew this together first and then sew it, then I'd be in a better position to make the corner where I want it. So I think I might do that and then sew these two together so that when I put that together, that's probably going to be it for along this piece. I may, if I go outward, it will probably be that way. Depends on how big I want this to be. Then of course I've got this piece. So these are smaller triangles. These are larger triangles. And I could start attaching this to pieces here, but if I wanted to do this, for example, I think I would want to do that before I attached that. I don't know if I want to attach that though. That's a lot of triangles going around there. Not sure that's what I want. I think I may just do smaller pieces like this and either do just smaller quilts, little mini quilt kinds of things, or do pieces like this and then start putting them together. I think what I'll go ahead and, no, I'm going to reverse sew this so that I can start putting that piece together. And then I will sew this wherever I decide I want to, which will then turn that into a non-raw applique section when that seam gets turned under. We'll see how it goes. So my first step is to reverse sew this and then can sew this on, sew that on, yada yada. In the process of forgetting where I had things, I came across another solution, which would be to do that. Honestly, I don't like that as well. I want it to be pretty Jabberwocky. So I think I will still do that. And then this will go off in who knows what direction. Who knows, who knows? And see how things come out in balance. It may or may not be a good thing. So again, for order, I would want to sew these first and then sew that, so that I have a little more control over this corner. And we're not used to dealing with those very often in regular quilting. So next step is to seam this, and I can either have that match up with that edge, or I can pull this back a little bit, or pull it up more. And because I'm really coloring outside the lines today, I think I don't want it to match up. And that way, if it isn't perfect, then, you know, I never intended it to be perfect, right? Right. This is where I'm at this point. It looks pretty avant-garde, I will grant you. If you're a traditional quilter, you are tearing out your hair at this moment. In fact, if you're a modern quilter, you might be tearing out your hair at this moment. I am going to, just as a sort of test or experiment, I'm going to go ahead and applique this down, I think with invisible thread at this point. I may decide another piece that I want to do something other than invisible thread, but I'm going to do invisible thread, and then next time I think I will see about doing something else with it. You know, I always like to do embellishment or something, but for today I want to go ahead and get this applique down. And here's the piece as it stands at the moment. Not my favorite, not my least favorite. I learned some things, which is why I do this, and I have something that I think is interesting. I might make some adjustments to it. There's something here I would like to fix. And the process of applique also taught me some things about construction, and so I think I will call it a success, even if it isn't my favorite. Here it is lengthwise, which I know is kind of going off the page here, but it's how I really designed it. And I think there could be some more, because of course I'm going to try some ribbons and threads and whatnot going through it. But that's for next week. And it could also be that this is just one block, and there will be other blocks around it, maybe different sizes, but the same kind of thing. And it will be, if I do another block, it will be a chance for me to work out some other things so that it's some of these little foo-for-ahs come out a little better, a little closer to what I want. This bothers me a lot, so I will see if I can do something to fix that. That's it for today. Next week I will explore how I might do other things for this, or maybe I'll just decide to leave it. Oh, I just had an idea. We'll give that a try next week. But on Sunday, I will be back here, and we will be working some more on our villages, which is a lot of fun. I hope I will see you then, and back here on Wednesday to see what we do with this. In the meantime, be well, be safe, be happy, be quilting. Peace.